Yes, John or Sandra, would you start the live stream, please?
Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Communities Committee for the 21st of February. This is a very important meeting for a number of reasons, but first of all, wanted to start by mentioning to members and members of the public that our long-serving Service Leader for Housing, John Morrow, this is his last meeting. John has been a fantastic help to me in this new position that I took last May, and he's been an invaluable source of support for the last sort of year. He qualified in architecture and worked in an architect's practice before starting a career in the housing sector in 1993 with Dundee City Council as an assistant maintenance officer in the Whitfield area of Dundee. He started with Angus Council as a clerk of works within the maintenance team in 1994, going on to take roles as a technical officer with the remit including coordinator for energy conservation, manager for housing policy, and was appointed service leader for housing in 2013. John is a very well-regarded colleague and friend to many, not only in the housing team, but right across the council and the council and their partners. And he supported many staff to progress their careers through guidance and sharing his wealth of experience. I'd like to thank John for his work and dedication to Angus Council. His counsel and knowledge has been invaluable to elected members across the board for a vast number of years. And I'd like to wish him a long, healthy and happy retirement. And I'd like to bring in Councillor Fairweather, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, convener. Right, John. We've had our ups and downs, let's say, over the last few years. We've not agreed on everything, but what I can say is what a servant you've been to Angus Council. And you know, the amount of times that I've got in touch with you and your prompt replies and your help for my constituents has been exemplary. I also have to say thank you very much for contacting me individually just to say you are retiring. And like the convener, I'm going to wish you a very happy retirement. Good luck, John, and enjoy that retirement.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. And you can see councillors across the board clapping their hands there. Councillor Proctor.
Thanks very much, convener. I'd just like to kind of echo what Councillor Fairweather said, but a lot of people maybe don't realise that John is the officer who, apart from his housing portfolio, is responsible for veterans within the council, and he and I have worked very closely over the past 10 years. And when I first came on Angus Council, we had a bronze standard award. We then got a silver, and we currently hold gold, which is the top, and that's through you know, a lot of the hard work and input that John and leading his staff has done to the betterment of veterans within the Angus community. So, John, again, like Councillor Fairweather, I wish you a long and happy retirement, and I'll be sending you the papers on for SAFA as we discussed in the not too distant future. So well done, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Now we move on to the... Oh, John, are you wanting to come in on the back of that?
Yeah, I mean, I just really, if you don't mind, Chair, if you want to indulge me, just to say thank you for those kind words, I think, from yourselves and Councillor Fairweather and Councillor Proctor. I mean, although I'm looking forward to a new chapter in my life, I think inevitably it's, you know, tinged with a bit of sadness, inevitably, because I think, you know, leading the council's housing service for, you know, something like 10 years now, as Councillor Fairweather said, it's been challenging at times, but it's certainly never been dull. And I think any role like this, where you're juggling the complexities of financial stewardship, and we'll talk about that in a wee while, whilst also delivering frontline services to members of the public, we've inevitably limited resources, you know, and we're dealing with thousands of customers and trying to meet their needs, and that's never going to be easy. And I think it's doubly hard when many of our customers are needing our help to face a lot of complex issues, not least struggling with the cost of living. And again, that's impacting us especially today. And if you don't mind me saying, I am fortunate to have had a team of people who not only have the skills to manage the tasks that we have to do efficiently and effectively, but I think we've also got a set of values underpinning our work, and that's about us all wanting to make a positive difference in people's lives. And that's about understanding, it's about empathy for our customers, and it's also about passion. And I think sometimes, because we are passionate about our work, we also make mistakes. And I'd be the first to admit that we do make those mistakes, but we can't always satisfy everyone all the time. However, I really think that our team really try our best for them, and for the majority of our customers, I think, and for most of the time, we do a really good job. And I genuinely think that our council housing makes a significant contribution to making Angus a great place to live and work, which is obviously what we have in the council's vision. And I think we achieve that a lot of the time. And I think we should take pride in that. I certainly do. And I'm sure whoever my replacement is will share that pride. Thank you for that, Chair, for indulging me there.
Thank you, John. And no, it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the agenda. Do we have any apologies or substitutions today?
No, convener, there's no apologies. All members present.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. And declarations of interest or statements of transparency. Do we have any of those? Oh, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just a statement of transparency. I am a tenant of a council garage, so I think I just need to put that in there. I don't need to leave the meeting or anything.
Right, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Fairweather. You're muted, Councillor Fairweather.
Sorry, convener. Just a note of transparency as well. My partner is a landlord, but there's no financial interest for me, so I'll be staying in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. And Provost Boyd.
Yes, again, it's the statement of transparency. I do have a good few rental properties in Angus, and therefore, though it doesn't affect anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Boyd. Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, convener. Yes, I am a tenant in an Angus Council house, so in the interests of transparency, I will step out of the meeting during that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Melville. Councillor Cowdy.
Yep, thank you. Also, in the interest of transparency, our very small rental lockup, that is council rent. I don't think I need to remove myself from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdy. Is that everybody for declarations of interest and statements of transparency? Okay, there are no hands. Can we move on then to the minutes of the previous meeting? 3A, do we submit for approval the correct record? Agreed? Okay.
Agreed.
And 3B, 1 and 2, that's the Arbroath Harbour Joint Consultative Committee. We're recommended to note the minute of the meeting and approve the review of annual charges. Do we note and approve?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Right, we move on to agenda item 4. This is the Housing Capital and Revenue Budget Performance Report 22-23. And I believe, John Morrow, are you presenting? Or are you running into this report for us?
Yeah, I can certainly do that, Chair, if you're happy for me to go ahead and do
please
that. So this report sets out the housing revenue account, capital and revenue performance to December 2022. And it also projects an end of year position. And I think it's probably worth saying that in the same way that the council's general revenue fund services are under severe strain at the moment, as we all know, the HRA is now also experiencing challenging financial pressures on several fronts because of the volatility in the economy. And I think although prudent financial management in previous years has enabled us to make our housing service resilient against those negative economic headwinds, the pressures are now such that this is no longer the case. However, measures are being taken to ensure that our spending plans are contained within our resources and our officers are making adjustments to the business plan so that it remains sustainable over the long term. And in terms of what that's looking like for capital, you'll see that table 2 in the report sets out the position of the overall capital programme as at the 31st of December, and it also projects an expenditure to the end of the year. However, there is a big however, there continue to be many pressures, many uncertainties, so it's likely that the picture will change before the end of the year, but we'll be sure that our officers will update members with figures regularly, so you're kept informed. In terms of the revenue, in section 9, at this time it's projected that by the end of the financial year, the HRA will generate a deficit for the first time in a number of years, and although it's a small deficit of 115,000 at the moment. Should this be the ultimate year-end position once all the final accounts have been processed and completed, our officers will, however, from Finance and Housing, determine the best way to address that deficit. It's true to say that the volatile economic environment continues to impact the HRA revenue budget. Tenants' household incomes are severely under pressure, as we know, through high domestic energy costs and the cost of living difficulties that we're all too aware of. And that is making it harder for some of our tenants to keep up with their rent payment responsibilities. There also continue to be challenges in repairs and maintenance as our contractors continue to cope with material and component supply difficulties, and they also have their own staff shortages. So all of those things are impacting us. But at that point, I'll stop and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, John. So do we have any questions for John Morrell here just now? See, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it was just 6.3 of the report, aids and adaptions. It's obviously telling us that they've got the people in place now for doing the, what do you call it? Lost my place here. The occupational therapists. Yeah, and so it's saying that the programme can catch up with the original identified need. Can we get some sort of idea how long that'll take to actually get to that point where we're caught up, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor John. Do you want to just come in from the questions? Yeah.
Yeah, if you have that. And thanks, Councillor, for that question. I think, yeah, we are, or our occupational therapy colleagues are still catching up, as we said in the report there. I think we envisage that probably it'll take us through the next financial year to catch up. They're certainly making good progress. They did have some recruitment issues, and because of the restrictions during COVID where they couldn't enter occupied properties to carry out the assessments, that's obviously the cause of the problem. But we think that our colleagues will catch up during the course of the next 9 months to 12 months. So during the next financial year, we should be back on track.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I'm looking at 10.4 on page 19 with repairs and maintenance. I do absolutely understand that QAPM are making great inroads now, but I was just wondering if we have received, or are we going to receive, any compensation from the last contractor?
Chair, if you're happy for me to answer that, we are hoping, or we think there will be some sense of money coming back in, but at the moment we're taking the careful steps of making sure that we do everything within the legal terms of the contract, and that's taking a bit of time. But we certainly think there will be money owing to us, and to some extent, you know, the figures that we have in the accounts make provision for that. Although, as usual, we're very prudent with that, and we don't add in sort of the figures that it could be. We're very pessimistic. We take the pessimistic view rather than the optimistic view, but we certainly think there'll be a bit of money coming back in. It's not going to be a huge amount, I don't think, but there should be some. We hope that we'll get that during the course of the next 6 months, probably. So it'll give us a clearer position come the end of the year accounts.
Thank you. Every little helps, obviously, in this difficult time.
Have we got any then comments on this? Councillor Cowdy.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's just a very gentle note on page 23, which is Appendix 1. You can see under Forfar we've got Jubilee Park, Letham, and it's just obviously that does actually fall into Arbroath West, Letham and Freakham ward. So I've just seen that in a few different papers. So if it's possible to pop that under Arbroath instead of Forfar, that would be great.
Okay, any other comments? No. Okay, we're asked then for the recommendations to scrutinise, review and scrutinise the contents of the report in 1 and 2, the projected year-end positions on capital and revenue expenditure. Do we review and scrutinise them? Do we accept it? Recommendations 1 and 2?
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 5, starting on page 33.
Convener, sorry to catch your attention. In line with my earlier statement, I'll depart the meeting just now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Melville. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 5. This is the Housing Revenue Account Rent Setting and Budget Strategy 23, 24, 26, 27. I believe Councillor Brays wants to come in first on this one.
Yes, thanks, Convener. And I'd firstly like to echo your and other members' comments regarding Mr. Morrow and extend to him my personal thanks for all the help he's been, not just in the recent months since I became the administration's housing spokesperson, but throughout my time as a councillor. He's been a fantastic asset to Angus Council. And I'd like to extend my thanks to all officers and staff who work so hard in and around our housing team. I'm sure all of us are aware of just how difficult things have been for them. To go straight from the trials and tribulations of the COVID crisis into a cost of living crisis and an energy crisis and the construction cost inflation crisis and repair and maintenance contract failures has made their jobs so much harder. It is an enormous tribute to all of them that tenant satisfaction remains so high. You're greatly appreciated by our tenants and I'm sure by everyone on this committee. The proposed rent increase is well below the rate of inflation, as was last year's increase. It's doable this year. The Housing Revenue Account can stand it. Our tenants tend to be at the lower end of the scale in terms of household income, and therefore at the very sharp end of the cost of living crisis. And it's important we do what we can to minimise rent increases. However, we must recognise that rent increases this far below inflation are unsustainable in anything other than the short term, especially if we want to continue to improve our housing stock and service. Colleagues, the annual rent review Colleagues, the annual rent review is always an important date in the Council's calendar, as it gives us the opportunity to consider the value for money that our housing service provides for our tenants. It also enables us to set out our business planning strategy for the future, so we can be clear about how tenants' rents can bring the most benefit for as many of our customers as possible. The main issue affecting our tenants in the short term is the cost of living crisis, and we know that sadly many of our customers are struggling with fuel bills. So having the affordable rents that we do is really important. However, equally important is that we have the ability to continue investing in our homes, so they are of a high standard and so they are energy efficient and can be heated for a reasonable cost. So the work we are doing to insulate our homes to much higher standards and the renewable heating technologies we are now utilising are both designed to minimise heating costs for tenants so they can live safely and comfortably. And the same measures will also help us to minimise carbon emissions and have houses that are resilient to the extremes of weather caused by climate change. This is a long and challenging programme of work which will benefit all of our tenants, so it's vital that we have a sustainable business plan. This means continuing to contain borrowing at affordable levels and setting a rent that will deliver a balanced and prudent budget, while still allowing substantial investment in our homes for the future. I believe that the proposed rent rise of 4.1% is one that will deliver both these objectives and I commend it to the committee. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Braze. I see Councillor Fairweather's coming in the back of that, then I'll bring in John to go through the report. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you. Convener, if you want John to speak first, I'm quite happy. Right, I mean, I felt that Councillor Braze was a comment, so right, mine is mostly going to be a comment as well. But if you want to bring in Mr. Morrow first, I have no problems.
Thanks, Councillor Fairweather. We'll bring in John first, and then we'll go through. Councillor Braze was introducing as the housing spokesperson. So, John.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Braze. Yeah, as you say, this report sets out the Housing Revenue Account budget strategy for 2023 to 27, and we're seeking approval for the rent levels and charges for 2023-24. So, as we all know, the continued high rate of inflation and its impact on the cost of living for households is a critical factor in how we manage the HRA. And as Councillor Braze says, it's imperative that a balance is struck between maintaining rents at an affordable level, whilst also being able to invest in stock improvement and increasing the supply of new housing, whilst at the same time being able to meet the increasing operating costs that we're experiencing. And as inflationary pressures are increasingly impacting all areas of our business, it is becoming harder to balance these priorities. And unfortunately, that means that difficult decisions are needed on how we use our resources. Encouragingly, however, having said that, our customer satisfaction levels remain high. The HRA business plan must be sustainable, as Councillor Braze mentioned, so a rent rise is essential. An analysis shows that any rent increase below the consumer price index does have a significant impact on the financial position, effectively removing around £1 million in capital spend for every 1% we are below CPI. In our rent rise consultation this year, the majority of tenants who responded voted for the increase of 4.1%, and that was at the time of the consultation in July, when CPI stood at 10.1%, and it's remained above 10% since that time, as we know. A 4.1% rent increase is therefore recommended for approval by committee. The proposed increase will have the effect of taking the average rent to £75.91, an increase of £3 over last year. And that would mean that our rents would remain some of the most affordable in the country. However, it's worth noting that we will need to return to above inflation increases in future years as part of our strategic approach to ensuring the long-term sustainability of the HRA. I think that's probably enough for me to say.
Thank you, John. I would invite questions, but Councillor Fairweather, if you want to come in with your comment just now, I'm more than happy for that.
Right, thank you very much for that, right, Convener, because basically I don't have any questions. But what I would like to say is the Tenant Steering Group, what a fantastic job they do year in, year out. I was a bit surprised when I read it. 5.2, that only 2.8% of tenants actually replied to the consultation. However, when you look at the percentages, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that option one, 4.1%, got the most votes. We are in the cost of living crisis. And it's just ironic, as far as I can see, that the Scottish Government, who I thought quite rightly, put forward a rent freeze, but that ends, and now local authorities are left to put rents up. The biggest problem, another problem we've got is next week we've got a budget. Is council tax next? And what John Morrow said, it's extremely worrying, right, regarding rent arrears. And if we've got rent arrears now, with this price increase, is that going to increase? I actually have no doubt that it will. This is not good news, for our residents and our tenants, and nobody can say any different. We have been left in severe shortfall from the Scottish Government. And I would urge the convener and his SNP members to go back to the Scottish Government, ask for more money, and they say a cost of living crisis, let them help us alleviate it. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Right, we're on to questions here. So if I could ask these questions first of all, and then we'll move on to comments. I allowed Councillor Fairweather to come back in on the back of Councillor Brace's statement. So Councillor Proctor.
Thanks very much, convener. And again, just like to thank Mr. Morrow and all his team for producing this very informative and full report. My question is basically, it's on page, the table on page 40, and we're talking about loss of rents, and there's unlet houses and garages and bad debt provision. And I just wonder what steps we're doing, and how we have, when people are really clamouring often for housing, particularly social housing in Angus, at the fair rent that we do, we just mentioned there, and a lot of people I know looking for lockups, how we end up having unlet houses and garages. Now, I appreciate that sometimes houses have to be left unlet for a while to let work, repair work, maybe modernisation to go on. But it's a fair old bit of money there, and I just wonder if Mr. Morrow could maybe just fill me in on that one. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for the question. And there's a question you're right to highlight it. It's one of our main priorities, obviously, around making sure that our property is back in the letting pool as quickly as possible, mostly when we have changes of tenancy. And just to remind members, our turnover of stock in any average year is around 10%. That's through sort of natural turnover of tenants. So it's usual to have our properties empty whilst we get them ready for reletting. The relet works, though, have been taking longer to complete. We admit that. It's a combination of things, I think, a result of material supply issues that we're all aware of, contractors experiencing labour shortages, and we are also experiencing real problems with utility companies resolving debt on meters and getting meters cleared and reconnected. And you'll see a lot of that probably in the press. It's affecting other local authorities and housing providers across the country, and we're no different from them. So that is impacting on the length of time that the voids are taking to get back in the letting pool. A number of properties have been held intentionally whilst we carry out major planned work, as we've probably said before, and that does bring the benefits for the tenants that move in, and that they don't have to put up with the works or the disruption of those works taking place around them whilst they're in the property. And it also means they get a better product when they get the keys for their new home. There's also a bit of the failure of that previous repairs supplier that we touched on in the previous question, that did have a considerable impact and caused a backlog of repairs. However, the contractors that we now have in place are getting through the backlog, and we're making steady progress. So it's an improving picture, I think. So I would expect this time next year to be reporting much better figures once we carried out all these improvements to the process during the course of the next few months.
Thank you very much, convener. Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow. And I do hope that we'll continue with the productivity in reducing the number of unlet properties and unlet garages. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. And mine's a comment, and I would firstly like just to convey my best wishes to John Morrow as well for a longer, healthy retirement. Yeah, I guess my comment's really relating to the remarks made by Councillor Fairweather, which I just do not understand. I do not see what role the Scottish Government have in our housing revenue account. If you look at table 4, it's clear there is no input from the government. The government input helps us subsidise building new houses. It doesn't play any role in affecting the rent. So I just didn't really understand that comment.
Okay, well, since Councillor Duff's opened the well, I believe Councillor Scott, are you in for a comment? Sorry, a question? You're muted just now, Jill.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were on questions. Have we moved to comments?
We're
missed
on.
the boat?
We're still on questions, Councillor Scott.
Okay, that's
keep
fine. I
going.
was a bit confused because we seem to have had comments as well. Mr. Morrow, can I just ask you to run me through the table 2 proposed weekly service charges on page 41? Obviously, the dispersed percentage rise 63.9, 36.6, and 55.7. That's quite a sizable amount. And given that temporary accommodation and some other providers' properties is extortionate, nobody that works can be placed in there. So obviously they're going to go to council dispersed. So I just wonder if you could run me through that and what the lowest, median and highest is, please.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. John?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have those figures to hand precisely as you asked there. What I would say, I guess, is that you're right in that our dispersed temporary accommodation is at a much better value than other providers. I don't think that's necessarily why a lot of customers would come to us over other housing providers, because generally our dispersed temporary accommodation is pretty much full. So there is a shortage of temporary accommodation, just like there's a shortage of permanent mainstream housing. So we experience relatively high demand, but other authorities who have higher charges than us also experience the same demand. I mean, I think it's one of the areas where in future probably there will be more national scrutiny of the charges that are experienced by people in temporary accommodation. We're probably in a good position because I think we do offer relatively good value in comparison to others. What I would suggest is that maybe we follow up for any figures you want after the meeting. We can certainly have you let you have a bit more detail in the cost of the rents and the cost of the electricity and the other charges that people experience.
That would be lovely. Thank you. And let me wish you all the best in your retirement as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Meakin.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's as a comment. Is that okay?
Right. Just one sec. Has anybody got any further questions for John? Okay, we open up now to comments. Any comments? Starting with Councillor Meakin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on a comment on the increase of the 4.1% on rents. I think it's worth to say and to remind members that the average rent per dwelling in Scotland last year was £78 per week. In Angus, it was £73. So we were well below the Scottish average for our rents. Now, the proposed increase will take our average to around £76, which again is still below the average for Scotland in 21-22. So we're still relatively cheap for our rents. Our rents are cheaper than many of our neighbours. For example, we're cheaper than Aberdeenshire, Aberdeen, Dundee and Fife. We should also keep in mind that many of our tenants will receive help via housing benefit. In fact, the number at the moment is 2,160. Now, there have been changes to housing benefit, so many now receive assistance with rent through universal credit. And added to this, the estimate is around possibly 5,000 or more tenants who will receive assistance via housing benefit or universal credit. In the main, therefore, for those at the lower end of earnings, i.e. those on benefits or those who receive universal credit or housing benefit, they will be at least in part protected from any rise because it will be covered by the donation they get, let's face it, from central government in terms of housing benefit or universal credit. So while it sounds maybe 4.1 sounds like a lot, in reality, when we take into account those that are actually protected from increases, then it's maybe not as bad as it first sounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meakin. Are there any further comments on this report? Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I just wanted to come back and comment on Councillor Fairweather's comment. I think from what we've heard from Mr. Morrow, the big challenge for our tenants and for Angus Council is the cost of living crisis and the rampant inflation. None of this is the fault of the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Government can do very little to mitigate that. Thank you.
And to round things off, finish off with Provost Boyd.
Yes, thank you, Councillor McDonald. Yes, a couple of comments. You know, you have to invest in your housing stock to be able to improve with new energy performance is the big one, of course, but new kitchens, new bathrooms, and so on. So I don't think it's unfair. I think even the committee of tenants have actually said this is fair. We wouldn't be in this mess if we had only put them up by 1% last year. And finally, I do notice the comments that were made in the past about the electricity companies, and it is totally what a mess this country is in because of the privatisation. You've heard me saying it before, the privatisation of the utility companies. You're quite right, John. I would imagine I've spent 28 hours on the phone trying to get electricity. Imagine that's nearly a full-time week. I got £150 compensation. The council won't get that £150 compensation for it. It's dysfunctional situation that's there, and it's terrible. That's the reasons why we have the voids, and we should be doing our utmost to be going. And maybe my Conservative friends and the other ones like Councillor Fairweather should be actually getting on to the Conservative Party and asking them, will they sort out this mess of the utilities, because it's going on right, left, and centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So we'll just go back to council business, where we look at the recommendations. For agenda item number 5, we're asked to recommend that the committee, and it's 1 to 7. So 1 is approve the revenue budget. Do we approve that?
Agreed.
Yeah. 2 is approve the average rent increase of 4.1%. I'm going to go through every one. Approve the rent increase for St Christopher's travelling site, garages and garage sites.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah. 4 is approve the HRA plan. Yeah.
Agreed.
5, note the based assumptions made in the affordability assessment.
Agreed.
And 6, approves the prudential indicators as shown in Appendix 5.
Agreed.
And the last one, 7, note the rent rises by the Consumer Price Index are not sustainable, as this will not facilitate the balanced HRA budget. Do we note that?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to an end of the Communities Committee. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Convener.
Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you.